The question at the heart of It Follows is, how do you continue to live in the face of regret and trauma? As Yara quotes directly from Dostoevsky,
And the most terrible agony may not be in the wounds themselves, but in knowing for certain that within an hour, then within 10 minutes, then within half a minute, and now, at this very instant, your soul will leave your body and you will no longer be a person. And that this is certain. The worst thing is that it is certain.
It Follows is about this certainty. In the form of an unstoppable and noble creature which patiently follows its victims to the grave, It Follows Munster is commonly imagined as a metaphor for HIV or AIDS. This is somewhat reductive and potentially insulting given that the disease is no longer a death sentence, but it is also somewhat understandable. You contract the monster through sex, and once contracted, it will follow you forever. If you really want to classify the monster, you're better served imagining it as sexual assault and the trauma, self-loathing, shame and regret which sexual assault causes its victims. The monster often appears naked or in various states of undress. It appears as the pervert who keeps spying on Jay. It appears as a woman we assume is a prostitute, missing some teeth and shamefully wetting herself. Jeff says the monster appears as what allows it to get close to its victims, but it feels more like it manifests from its victims' subconsciouses. At one point, it takes on the form of the father who is clearly absent from Jay's life. It kills Jeff in the form of his own mother, the implications of which are frankly horrifying. So too, I find it interesting that the monster is not just an abstraction or a psychological manifestation, but a concrete physical thing capable of interacting with and harming people other than its victims. Because like trauma, the monster is invisible and unknowable to friends and family, but it still affects them. It hurts those around us. Incredibly Freudian and psychosexual though this all might be, it strikes me that the reason the monster is contracted to sex has less to do with supernatural STIs and more to do with how it allows It Follows to talk about regret and trauma.
Okay then, who'd you pick?
Him.
The dad?
Ah, the son. I mean, how cool would that be to have your whole life ahead of you, you know?
Come on, it's not like you're old. You're 21.
I know, but look at how happy that kid is.
Because sex is normal and it is healthy, but it shouldn't leave you in a psychological prison cell. Jay's decisions are innocuous and they are normal and understandable, but they turn out to be irreversibly life-shattering. Because sexual assault does this. It dehumanizes its victims, fills them with regret and trauma and shame, and then leaves them to deal with it. In some ways the regret is the worst, because it leaves us to ask, what if? What if Jay hadn't met Jeff? What if she hadn't agreed to a date? What if she'd taken his weird behaviour more seriously and hadn't had sex with him? Jay is blameless in all of this. These are not behaviours or decisions that should be punished. But what makes it all worse is that Jay knows that these were her own decisions. The shame and regret of trauma is the wish that you could return to the moment of choice, to turn back and make a different decision. As T.S. Eliot reads in his poem of Regret and Longing, the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock,
and indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair.
Except it is of course already too late. Jay has already dared, and in daring can no longer turn back. What makes It Follows so emotionally impactful and frankly exhausting to watch is the knowledge that this could, in a manner of speaking, happen to you. It is a reminder that we are all at the whim of fate, and that once fate has struck, it will just up sticks and leave us to deal with the consequences. It is a reminder that regret and shame and trauma is endless and exhausting and life-consuming. And so, though discussions are dominated by questions about the monster, about what it is and where it comes from and what it's supposed to mean, it's best not to sweat the tangible details because director David Robert Mitchell doesn't really tell us anything about it beyond what it does. In fact, It Follows is so intent on keeping its monster at a metaphorical distance that the movie doesn't really have any of the usual beats or conventions of a teen horror movie. There is no tracking the monster to its source and learning what it is, no finding its weaknesses or breaking the curse. There is no weird old lady to explain where the monster comes from or why it exists, and no plot twist to reveal the truth of the thing. Jay traces it back to Jeff, and the trail goes not so much cold as just immediately freezes.
Who did it to you?
I met a girl at a bar. It was a one-night stand. I don't even remember her name. I think that's where it came from.
Mitchell's refusal to explain anything turns out to be both a strength and a weakness. It's a weakness because, with nothing to learn, the plot in any conventional sense just sort of ends. The scenes in which the characters are not running away often just see them sitting and waiting for the monster to turn up so they can run away. They play cards, they watch TV, they read, they swim. For large parts of this movie, not much really happens. And in a way, this couldn't really be any different. There is a lot of waiting because the worst part of trauma and shame and regret is the way it paralyzes its victims. And as a result, there is a lot of waiting. Naturally, It Follows can't help but be concerned with something arguably much more important than the details of its monster. Because the monster is unknowable and unstoppable and inevitable, the movie's characters have no choice but to learn to live with it. What kills its victims is, in a way, not really the monster itself, but their inability to accept it as a fact of life, their inability to understand that what has been done cannot be undone, that it will stay with them forever. Annie, the girl at the beginning of the movie, finds the emotional strain too much, finds the monster's existence too exhausting and wearing to sustain indefinitely. She sits on the beach and calls her father, and all but dictates a suicide note down the phone.
Dad, I'm sorry I can be such a shit to you sometimes. I don't know why I do that. Just know that I love you, okay? I just really love you both.
She gives in and waits for the monster to destroy her, waits for the pain to end because death and oblivion seems better than living like this. Jeff does bear the strain, but at great personal cost. His fear of death keeps him ever vigilant and aware, constantly afraid and always on the run, so nervous that anything or anyone unusual provokes a fight or flight response.
Do you guys see that girl right there?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Jeff has no friends. His house is a liminal space in which he keeps nothing personal because there's no point. He has no relationships save those he uses to distance himself from the monster. His life is one of pain and regret. He is alive, but this is not living. Greg willingly contracts the monster in what he convinces Jay is a selfless act, but his is actually the self-destructive and selfish behaviour of someone who either doesn't believe that the monster exists or is not a threat if it does. He is the trauma victim living in denial of trauma.
Have you seen it?
Nothing. I'm waiting. Looking. It's been 3 days. I don't think it's coming.
You believe me, right? You're not just playing along.
No, I believe you. I just don't think it's following me.
He contracts the monster and gets straight back to his life, believes that he can carry on as if nothing has changed, as if there is no threat, and the monster takes him easily. And then there's Jay. Jay ends the movie walking hand in hand with Paul. A figure walks behind them. Speculation about the figure is of course rife, it dominates discussions of the movie, but wondering whether this is the monster seems less important than the fact that Jay and Paul don't appear to care. Because the truth of it is that the monster, like the trauma, will always be with Jay, even when it is not. All that remains is to learn how to live with it. Because you could give in and let the monster take you. You could live in perpetual fear. You could live in denial and pretend it doesn't exist. Or, as Jay and Paul do, you can accept that the monster is a fact of your life and somehow find a way to live that life regardless. If the worst thing is that this is certain, then there is nothing to do but make peace with that certainty.